When the ticket booth prints a receipt with your name, don't take it. The bus station near the edge of town isn't anything remarkable. Just a few broken benches, a sputtering fluorescent light, and a ticket booth that looks like it hasn't been updated since the 1970s. Most people use the new terminal downtown now, so the old station is left for night workers, travelers running late, and the occasional drunk who stumbles in looking for a ride home. You can stand there for hours without seeing another soul, except for the man in the booth. The booth itself is a glass box with yellowed plastic walls and a drawer that slides out when you pay. The man inside doesn't move much, doesn't even blink sometimes. He just sits there behind the glass, watching. People say he's been there for decades, always at night, always alone. He doesn't smile, doesn't talk, and if you try to make small talk, he'll just stare at you until the silence becomes unbearable. The only sound is the clatter of the old receipt printer. That's where the rules come in. Everyone who's used the depot more than once knows them, though nobody dares to say them out loud. If you put your money down, he'll print your ticket. Sometimes, though, the printer wears longer than it should, and instead of just spitting out a bus pass, it rolls out a narrow strip of paper with something else. Your name. Full name. Printed in bold, block letters, sometimes even with details you never gave him, like your birthday or the address of the house you grew up in. The worst part? The names aren't random. They belong to people waiting in line. And if you take the slip with your name, you don't get on the bus. Not really. They say you board, the bus leaves, but you're never seen again. It's like you're erased from the world. One day you exist, the next you don't. Not missing, not dead, just gone, like you were never born. I've seen it happen. A woman in a red coat was standing 2 spots ahead of me once. She was restless, pacing, muttering that she was late. When the printer spat out her name, she grabbed it without hesitation, stuffing it into her purse. She boarded the midnight bus. Everyone swore she was there, that they saw her sit in the 3rd row by the window. But by the time the bus reached its first stop, there was no trace of her. Not even the driver remembered selling her a ticket. Her seat was empty, her luggage gone. People tried to convince themselves it was just coincidence, bad memory, or something less sinister. But it kept happening. The slips came at random, always too personal, too precise. A young man once pulled one with his grandmother's name and froze in horror. He left the paper on the counter and ran, never to return. Another time, a man took the slip despite the whispers of warning. His friend swore he never existed the next morning. His apartment was empty, his job records erased, his social media wiped clean. Even photographs he was in blurred like he'd never been there. I made the mistake once of seeing my own name printed. The booth was silent, the air heavy. The letters stared at me like they'd been waiting, like they knew I'd eventually stand at that counter. My hand twitched forward, instinctively, but I remembered the rules. Don't take it. I shoved my money into the drawer and waited. The man behind the glass didn't stop me, didn't argue. He just slid the drawer back with a plain bus ticket, eyes never leaving mine. That night, I didn't board the bus. I walked the long road home instead. The slip with my name sat inside the booth, probably still there. Sometimes, when I pass the depot, I imagine it waiting for me, curling slightly with age, my name bold and black as ever. So listen carefully, if you ever find yourself in that old bus station, desperate for a ride, follow the unspoken rule. Pay, take your ticket, but if the printer gives you something extra, don't touch it. Don't even look at it too long. Because once your name is in that booth, it already knows you. And if you take it, the bus won't take you home. It'll take you somewhere else. Somewhere you can't come back from. The old man's whisper carried through the empty station like wind curling between broken glass. His voice wasn't just a warning, it was a statement, a certainty carved into the air. I clutched the receipt tighter, the thin paper crinkling in my palm as though it had a heartbeat of its own. My name, perfectly printed in neat black letters, stared back at me. It wasn't just my name, it included my date of birth, the exact time I had walked into the station, and beneath that, a time that hadn't happened yet. Departure, 12:47 a.m. I glanced at the oversized station clock, its second hand twitching violently, stuttering back and forth as if stuck. 12:39 a.m. 8 minutes. That was all I had before. What? A bus? A train? A vanishing act into whatever somewhere else the old man meant? The man shook his head, his sunken eyes glistening under the flickering fluorescent lights. You can burn it, tear it, throw it away, he murmured, but once it prints, the route is already chosen. You've been called. I tore the paper down the middle, my hands trembling. The two halves fluttered to the ground, curling like ash. Relief lasted only a second before the booth rattled violently and spit out another receipt, the machine clattering like teeth in the cold. This time, the slip landed face up at my feet. Same details. Same time. But there was something new beneath it. Destination, not listed. A shrill hiss echoed from the far side of the station. Tracks that hadn't been used in decades trembled as something massive approached. No headlights, no engine hum, no wheels grinding steel, only the sound of wind rushing into the void. The station grew colder, the air dense with a metallic tang that tasted like blood. The old man backed away, his frail body folding into the shadows. "Don't step on," he begged, his voice breaking. "They'll call your name, and it will sound like you. But it won't be you. Don't answer." I wanted to run. I wanted to flee into the night and never return, but the station's exits had shifted. The glass doors were gone, replaced by blank, endless concrete walls stretching upward like a tomb. The benches had multiplied, rows upon rows of cracked seats leading into the darkness. And every single seat was filled. Not with people, not exactly. Shapes sat rigid and lifeless, their heads drooping, their skin stretched thin and gray like wax. Yet when I blinked, I saw faces I knew. My old teacher. My grandmother. The cashier from the corner store. People who were alive. People who weren't supposed to be here. They all turned toward me at once. The hiss grew louder, now unmistakably a vehicle pulling in. My body stiffened as the loudspeaker crackled overhead, a voice distorted and layered, like hundreds of mouths speaking in unison. "Boarding, passenger. Your name." The receipt burned hot in my hand. I hadn't realized I was still holding it. My name glowed faintly now, as if etched in fire. My chest tightened with the urge to step forward, to obey. Something deep inside whispered that the moment I did, everything would be over. Not death, not life, but something in between. The bus depot warped around me, walls stretching and bending, the air growing thick and heavy like molasses. The rows of waxy passengers stood now, rising in eerie unison. Their mouths opened wide, impossibly wide, and every one of them repeated the same phrase. "Take your ticket." The old man screamed, his voice shredding into a raw wail. "Don't take it. Don't take it." But my feet felt rooted to the ground, my body shaking as the invisible bus screeched to a halt. Doors groaned open with a hydraulic hiss, spilling pale light across the cracked tiles. And then, I heard it. My voice. Calling my own name from inside. Calm. Familiar. Almost relieved. The old man fell to his knees, clutching his head. "It's already too late," he whispered. "Once you hear yourself, it's already begun." The receipt burst into flames in my hand. And as the fire crawled up my arm, I realized he was right. It wasn't about the bus, or the booth, or the station. It was about answering the call. And I had already answered. The paper with my name on it crinkled in my trembling hand, its edges warm as if it had just come out of a fire rather than a machine. The crowd behind me was gone now, as though they had never existed. The fairground rides stood silent, their painted horses frozen mid-gallop, their bulbs flickering like dying stars. The air thickened, heavy and sweet with the smell of burnt sugar and something underneath, like rotting wood soaked in rain. The voice inside the booth had told me that the receipt wasn't a ticket but a key, and I could already feel the pull. My body resisted, but my mind felt as though invisible strings had already wound themselves around it, tugging me towards something I couldn't see but knew was waiting. The booths, the stalls, even the towering Ferris wheel began to dissolve into darkness, as if the ink of the world itself was running. The only thing solid was the booth, glowing faintly like a lantern on the edge of a void. "It'll take you somewhere else," the voice whispered again. Calm, measured, like it was only stating a fact. "Somewhere you can't come back from." And though my instinct screamed at me to drop the slip, my fingers clamped tighter around it, bloodless and rigid. The booth's shutter creaked and began to open, revealing a slot not large enough for a person but just wide enough for the paper in my hand. My name on the slip shimmered faintly, glowing like it was alive. I thought I could refuse, but my feet shuffled forward without consent, the dirt beneath me suddenly crunching like broken glass. The closer I came to the slot, the louder something whispered my name, not the way a friend or a loved one might say it, but stretched, warped, like the syllables were being chewed through teeth too sharp and too many. The air tasted metallic, and every hair on my arm stood erect. Somewhere in the shadows, I felt figures stirring, their outlines impossibly tall, bending forward as if to watch me with faces I dared not imagine. When the slip touched the slot, The world ruptured. Not with light, not with sound, but with absence. It was like every nerve in my body was unplugged for a second and then rewired to something else entirely. I blinked, and the fairground was gone. In its place was a hallway, long, endless, with ticket stubs scattered across the floor like autumn leaves. The walls pulsed faintly, breathing in and out, as though they were alive. The air wasn't air at all but thick, almost liquid, dragging at my chest with each breath. I could still hear the voice, but it was no longer confined to the booth, it was inside my head. "You answered," it said. "Now you walk." I bent down to pick up one of the discarded tickets from the floor. The stub was yellowed and brittle, covered in names scrawled over and over. Some were crossed out violently, claw marks tearing through the paper. Others were intact, letters fading as though the ink was being erased from existence. My hand shook when I realized some of the names weren't just random, they were familiar. Teachers I once had. Neighbors. People I hadn't thought about in years, swallowed up by time or tragedy. Each of them must have stood where I was standing now. Each had taken the slip with their name. And none of them had ever returned. The hallway stretched endlessly forward, but behind me there was nothing, just a wall of black that swallowed sight, sound, and thought. There was no going back. The only path was forward. As I walked, doors began to appear along the walls. Wooden doors, steel doors, ornate carved doors with golden handles, and some that were nothing more than slabs of stone with markings burned into their surface. Each door had a single name etched into it. Some glowed faintly like mine had. Others bled. One door stopped me cold. It had my mother's name carved into it. I reached out, hand trembling, but the voice hissed sharply, "Not yours." The handle turned hot, searing my palm, and I yanked it back before it melted into my skin. The farther I went, the heavier the slip in my hand grew. It was no longer paper but something harder, colder, almost metallic. The letters of my name had begun to shift, twisting into symbols I didn't recognize but somehow understood. It wasn't my name anymore, it was me. Condensed. Branded. Claimed. With each step, I felt less like a person and more like a passenger being moved, stored, catalogued. The whispers of unseen figures followed me, rising with every door I passed. They weren't calling my name anymore, they were laughing. At last, the hallway ended at another booth. Smaller, older, made of splintered wood and warped glass. Its window was fogged, but behind it I could see a shape, something sitting, waiting, with two long arms folded on the counter. It didn't speak, but its presence was suffocating. I knew what it wanted. The slip. My last tether to the world I had left. My mind screamed to hold on, but my arm moved without thought, sliding the slip beneath the glass. The thing's hand snatched it with claws that clicked against the counter like bone. The symbols on the paper flared, burned, and then vanished into ash. "You've arrived," the voice said, though now it sounded fractured, as if it came from a dozen throats. The booth dissolved, and I stood at the edge of something vast. A field stretched infinitely in every direction, filled with rows upon rows of carnival rides, ticket booths, and endless glowing slips raining from the sky like ash. Shadows wandered aimlessly between them, shuffling forward, forever searching for the booth that bore their name. None of them looked at me, yet I knew I was just another among them now. A name written on a slip, filed, stamped, erased. And then it hit me, the booth hadn't chosen me at random. It had been waiting. Every fairground, every carnival, every forgotten midway, they were all just different faces of the same place. The slip wasn't a mistake, it was a summons. And when the machine finally printed your name, it meant one thing only. Your turn had come. And mine already had.